Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, starting off our discussion right away. Now, Mr. Poulsen, first off, the Suez Canal has been inaugurated in 1869, an integral global trade route for the whole world, linking Asia with Europe, and a real serious source of foreign currency, and the Egyptian economy really stands on the cornerstone of the Suez Canal. Now, how important and how integral is the Suez Canal seen by the International Chamber of Shipping to the maritime transportation and shipping activity around the world, compared to as well the other routes the countries and the international trade is taking?
Well, I think thank you first of all for inviting us to join your show. It's very nice
pleasure
to be here, and I think your report on the Suez Canal with all the facts and figures really painted a very accurate picture of its critical importance to world trade. Of course, it's important to Egypt, is for there for all to see, but its importance to world trade cannot really be exaggerated. And I think the extension or the widening of the canal some years ago was obviously a great thing, and was done at a good time in terms of handling these very much larger ships that your report also referred to. And I think, not to dwell too much on history, but when we think of what happened with the Ever Given, I think this brought into the entire world's focus just, first of all, how critical these big ships are to world trade, but how critical the Suez Canal is to enable these ships to transit to and fro, cutting a huge amount of time and distance off what would otherwise be a much longer voyage. I think it's also interesting to note that the canal was, as you say, built in 1869, which is really a testament to at the time. It must have been an engineering feat, quite frankly, at that time. And I would just add on that the International Chamber of Shipping, we're only 101 years old. We were founded in 1921, so we're a mere baby compared to the 125-year-old Suez Canal. I gather you had a big celebration to celebrate that fact. So no, we cannot overemphasize its importance. And I think the other thing is to bear in mind that its location. It's a bit like I live in Singapore. Singapore's location as a port to when to call for bunkers or do crew changes or dry dock your ship or whatever in the East-West trade is critical. And Singapore has become a global maritime center because partly of its location. And I think in the case of the Suez, the canal's economic zone has tremendous potential if only it can be allowed to develop because of its location, apart from anything else. So I know that Dr. Shireen El Naga, who is a very good friend of ICS, and by the way, a kind of a known face on the international maritime stage, and a great promoter of the nation of the Republic of Egypt. He has always been told us a lot about this zone, and has been very instrumental in helping to try and build it.
Well, Mr. Platten, I mean, talking about the potential that such a canal has. Now, we've seen the extension and the widening of the Suez Canal a few years ago, and we understand it cuts on time for the cargo ships, the containers, fastens the global sort of trade activity in general. Now, also establishing a lot of economic zones along the Suez Canal. How can we actually work on developing and maximizing the potential of Egypt's Suez Canal in terms of the shipping routes, and also turning the Suez Canal into an international trade and shipping hub?
I think, as Mr. Poulsen has said, it's a massively strategic location, the Suez Canal always has been. and it cuts about 14 days off our voyage around the south coast of Africa. I think the potential is immense. We're going to be entering into a major transition in the shipping industry over the coming years as we start to decarbonise. And I think there's a massive opportunity. And I know there's plans in place for Egypt to become a leading producer of clean fuels and those zero and carbon fuels to power what we call in the International Chamber of Shipping the fourth propulsion revolution. It really is at a pivotal moment at time at the moment, and seeing some of the ambitious plans, it actually is giving confidence to the shipping industry that we can actually make this transition. We are committed as an industry to being net zero by 2050, and that's going to mean massively scaling up the production of these low and zero carbon fuels in order to make that happen. So to me there's just a really bright future, and given the location of the canal, and it's 1869 it was built, and it's still as relevant now as it was then, so a really massive opportunity for the future.
Well, having this direction for green and environmentally friendly sort of activities, now the majority of the cargoes and the containers are really oil and liquefied natural gas, and Egypt has its own vision of sustainable development goals for 2030. Now, how can we actually reach that sort of balance, even though the main cargo going around the world are oil products and liquefied natural gas, and at the same time reimagining the whole industry as a green and environmentally friendly industry?
I mean, of course, as you produce these clean fuels, they're going to have to be shipped somewhere.
Yes.
Because actually the places where they're most likely to be produced are places which need to get to the market. So, for example, we were in discussions with the government of Chile about they've got an ambitious program to produce many 100 million tons of green ammonia each year. Now, that's no good being in Chile unless it's being able to ship to the markets when it needs it. And this is where Egypt and the Suez Canal can play a great role, not just in the production, but also in the transshipment. So there'll be a gradual move, I predict, as we move away from oil and much more into the sustainable fuels, but they'll still have to be shipped somehow. And so you can only see the canal becoming even more important in order to get those fuels to the right markets going forward.
Yes. Mr. Poulsen, now, if we're talking about the development of the Suez Canal, really turning it into a serious, I mean, walking the walk, not just talking it, like a serious shipping hub. Now, how do we actually get to do that? Is it only done by Egypt on its own? Is it some sort of a cooperation or coordination among the different chambers and different canals? Is it about the shipping companies as well? What can the International Chamber of Shipping do to help Egypt become this shipping hub?
Well, I think as we've already, I think, underlined, the potential is absolutely enormous. A criticism of Egypt, and this is not exclusive to Egypt because many countries suffer from this, is bureaucracy. And if Egypt could find a way whereby you could, in a way, when I say isolate, I don't mean literally, but in the same way that China many years ago, 30, 40 years ago, designed what they call economic zones with very user-friendly, very regulation-light approach in order to attract foreign investment and simply make it easier. If Egypt could find a way to do that, then I would think the sky is the limit. And I'm not criticizing Egypt per se, because bureaucracy is something we have to live with in every country. But if the interests of the nation could be aligned in this way with the international shipping community, I mean, many companies would like to come here and do things. There's no question. I mean, the logistic chain of today is very different than the logistic chain of yesterday. And if you just think of just say warehousing, just as one example, I mean, it could be massive. So I think this is, shipping is the ultimate global business. And well, I use the analogy, if you play a game of football, the rules are the same for everybody. There are no special rules for one country or another.
Yes.
So if you approach it with a very global mindset, I think, as I say, the sky's the limit.
And does that include talking about developing the services for the shipping?
Yes, I mean the services will come if the need is there. The services will always follow whether it's logistics, whether it's ship owners, whether it's any maritime centre. There's sort of a core, and then the services will all come. I mean, take Singapore. 40 years ago, it was a backwater. In reality, it was a regional, perfectly okay place, but it was a regional centre. Hong Kong was a very dominant shipping centre. Today, these roles are completely reversed because Singapore pursued a strategy. They laid down, this is what we want to do, this is where we want to be in 34 years' time. And so they built it brick by brick. These things are not created overnight. There has to be a long-term, very well thought out strategy, and you have to stick to it because it has to be credible. But once the global community can see that, well, this is working, and let's join this. It will happen, but it takes time, and it must be long-term, and it must be strategic.
Yes. Well, Mr. Platten, now talking about the Suez Canal and other shipping routes around the world, how does or where does Egypt rank among the other routes? I mean, if we're talking about development and maximizing and fulfilling the potential of the Suez Canal, there is some sort of competition between the Suez Canal, and it's probably a healthy competition for the benefit and the good of global trade. But where do we rank? Where does the Suez Canal rank among them? And what are the main points where we can actually excel, or we need to work on more to have more of an edge and be more competitive?
I think Mr. Poulsen highlighted some of the things that need to happen to really kick-start and get massive investment coming into the country. But I think in your report you mentioned $1 trillion worth of goods flowing through the Suez Canal each year. The global trade is 14 trillion, so it's a huge percentage of the global trade goes to the Suez Canal every single year. So it's got that strategic advantage that few other places have, to be honest with you. So I think there's lots that can be done to sort of enhance that, and some of the things we've already talked about as well. There is competition, there's always competition, but at the moment the best way to get goods from where they're manufactured, often in Southeast Asia, to their markets in Europe is through the Suez Canal. And we saw that when the Ever Given incident in March 2021, when there were some 350 ships, I think, at one time were waiting to traverse the canal. And there were massive, massive disruptions to the supply chain, and all credit actually to the Suez Canal Authority, because I think as an industry we were expecting that ship to be stuck for weeks, if not months. And I think 6 days later that ship was freed and trade was allowed to resume, and that just shows how important the Suez Canal is to the world trade, and will be, and the development and the potential is immense.
Yes. Well, over the past couple of years, I mean, other than even the political turmoils taking place around the world, there was also the coronavirus pandemic. How did that affect the sort of global trade and the shipping industry, and what was the International Chamber of Shipping? How was it dealing with it?
So when the pandemic hit I suppose, globally in March 2020, essentially the world shut down. So all travel stopped. Shipping never stopped.
Yes.
Shipping carried on doing it, but we had a real massive issue with our crews, our seafarers, who actually manned the ships. They're the heroes, in my way, of the pandemic, and they just couldn't get home. We couldn't get the crews relieved, and we couldn't get so they were stuck on board ships. Sometimes they're up to 20, 21, nearly 2 years beyond they should have been, and also we couldn't get their reliefs out to join the ships because all air travel was shut. So it was an immense problem we had as an industry, the mental health problems, the welfare problems that we had to deal with, and we worked in quite close collaboration with the social partners, International Transport Workers Federation, and also other industry partners to try and solve and put together protocols, health guidance in place. But actually, you know, we mentioned Dr. El Nagar as well, but he was very helpful as well in helping facilitate for crew changes through Egypt and through the Suez Canal, working with the authorities here to put protocols in place. So that was, I think by the summer we were able to start restarting the crew changes, particularly, and some sort of forward-thinking countries like Egypt were a real critical part of solving the problem. At one point, we had over 400,000 seafarers beyond the length of the contract, out of a population of 1.6 million seafarers. And that's, you know, that's diminished quite a bit now, but it was a real issue then. And so we needed countries like Egypt, we needed organisations like the Suez Canal Authority and like-minded people to solve these real problems that we face. But all the way through, shipping still delivered.
Yes. Well, Mr. Poulsen, Dr. Shirin Nagara has mentioned the kind of work that he's been doing and Egypt has been doing, getting in touch and moderating and mediating between Egypt, the Suez Canal, and also the International Chamber of Shipping. And he pointed out to the nature of the work the Chamber is doing in actually connecting different companies, the shipping companies, connecting different shipping companies in Egypt and abroad, and also the different sort of canals. How challenging has that been, and did you feel any sort of difference over the past few years, especially after the extension and expansion rather and widening of the Suez Canal? Did the dynamics of this sort of work strategy differ? Did it change over time?
Well, let me just, for the benefit of your viewers, just explain quickly what what the ICS actually is, because I bet many don't know what it is. We are an association of associations, excuse me, so our memberships are national associations, about 37 countries at the moment are members, and we have about a dozen associate members, which are smaller niche associations, or in the case of some countries that only have one shipping line, they will be a member through the association system. And as I said before, we were founded in 1921, and I think our biggest single role is to represent industry. For want of a better word, we are considered kind of an NGO at the IMO, in the International Maritime Organization, which is the regulator. A UN agency is based in London. It's a regulator for the shipping industry. It's made up of countries. About 175 countries are members of the IMO. So when new regulation is introduced, we will go there with our team of experts from our secretariat, and we'll talk to countries and try and explain how this is either a very bad idea or a very good idea, and how to make the new regulation as effective and useful as possible. So that's that's one thing we do. But we also, we liaise on any number of subjects. The Gulf of Aden crisis with hijackings, we were extremely active in that, and now of course in Western Africa we've again been active there on piracy and so forth. But I would say that to answer your second part of your question, we have noticed since this crisis of COVID came, as Guy said at the beginning of February, March of 2020, we've seen a whole new level of cooperation amongst all the stakeholders. The ILO in Geneva, International Maritime Organization, the unions representing the seafarers called the ITF, ourselves, really across industry, there has been, United Nations, there's been a sort of a willingness to cooperate in a ways that I've never seen before. And that is partly a sort of a needs-must kind of question. I think it was really the COVID brought on the fact that if we don't cooperate, we cannot keep this industry going. And this industry, as we showed during the height of the crisis, kept going.
Yes.
I mean, we kept literally delivering the goods. And as a quick aside, on a point that Guy made, as far as trade flows are concerned, in the early months of 2020, it is true that the trade reduced by about 30%. Container lines were cutting back, laying up ships and reducing services, because everyone assumed COVID would be the end of the world. By Q3 of 20 and into 21, a boom took place that the likes of which we had never seen. And no one, and I've checked this very, very carefully, forecast this. Nobody. It's just one of these things that when you lock people away for long enough and they can't travel, they can't go to restaurants, and they can't stay in hotels, one day they go online and start spending and buying things, and the container ships need to ship them. And so the container industry and the Suez Canal would have benefited tremendously. I think your growth figures that your clip showed, I mean, that says it all.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, as Mr. Poulsen has mentioned, the Suez Canal actually recorded high revenues in April 2022 compared to many years ago. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.